Okay, for our entire lives, we hear one thing over and over: climb the ladder, get that promotion, move up. But what if I told you that for most of us, that is actually terrible advice? We're about to dive into an idea that pretty much goes against everything you've ever been taught about building a successful career. I mean, we're all taught to just keep climbing, right? More money, a better title, that's the goal. But what if that next step up isn't a step up at all? What if it's actually a step right off a cliff? I know, that sounds completely upside down, but the data on this is, well, it's shockingly clear. So, how on earth could taking a promotion, the very thing we're all shooting for, be a bad thing? Let's break down exactly how this trap is set.
So here's our game plan. First, we're going to look at the promotion trap itself. Then, we'll get into a classic management theory that explains why it happens. After that, we'll look at the cold, hard numbers that prove this is real. And finally, we'll talk about a new way to think, a new framework for winning a different kind of game.
All right, first up, let's talk about the big misunderstanding we all have about what a career path is even supposed to be. We tend to see our jobs as a video game with a really clear progression. You start at level 1, you get good at the skills, you beat the boss, and boom, you move to level 2. Simple, right? Well, here is the crucial mistake in our thinking. What if you go from being an absolute expert at, say, a fast-paced action game to suddenly being dropped into a slow, complicated strategy game? The skills just don't transfer. And that is the promotion trap. It's not about playing a harder level. It's about being forced to play an entirely different game you've never even seen before. And look, this isn't just a fun little analogy. It's a famous, well-documented idea in management theory called the Peter Principle. And it's the reason why so many companies seem to be filled with managers who are, well, just not very good at their jobs. Believe it or not, this was written way back in 1969. It actually started as satire, but it was so true it became a core concept in business. The idea is simple, but kind of devastating. The system is basically designed to promote you right up to the point where you fail. Here's how the cycle works. You are great at your job, so you get promoted. And you're great at that new role, so you get promoted again. This keeps happening until, bam, you land in a position that requires skills you just don't have. And right there, your performance drops, the promotions dry up, and you're stuck. That becomes your final stop in the company. This is the classic example we see all the time, especially in the tech world. You've got an absolute wizard of a coder, right? Someone who is just a genius at solving complex technical problems. The company wants to reward her, so what do? They make her a manager, and just look at the contrast here. On one side, you have the skills that made her a brilliant coder: logic, systems thinking, deep focus. On the other, the skills of a manager: empathy, communication, navigating office politics. There's almost zero overlap. It's a completely different job. And the final result is a net loss for everybody. The company pulls its best technical mind off the front lines, and in return, it gets an unhappy, ineffective manager who now probably makes their whole team miserable. It's a system that actively turns competence into incompetence. Now, you might be thinking, okay, this is the neat theory, but there is hard empirical evidence that proves this isn't just a story. It's a real structural flaw in how we promote people. A few years ago, some researchers analyzed data from over 200 different companies, looking at 53,000 workers, to see if the Peter Principle was real. And they focused on sales teams because, performance is super easy to measure with sales. So the first thing they found was exactly what you'd expect. The single biggest reason someone got promoted to sales manager was because they were a top salesperson. The company rewards its stars. Makes sense, right? But again, just think about the skills and personality traits. The best salespeople are often lone wolves. They're hyper-competitive, aggressive, and laser-focused on their own individual targets. A good manager, though, needs the complete opposite. They need to be collaborative, patient, and put the team's success way ahead of their own. And here it is, the bombshell result from the study. They found a negative correlation. Let me repeat that. The better someone was at selling, the worse their team's performance was after they became a manager. The promotion was literally hurting the company's bottom line. The researchers called this a double whammy of just destroying value. First, you take your best player off the field. And second, you make them a bad coach who then actively tanks the performance of everybody else on the team. It's a disaster. So, if the whole system is basically designed to make you fail, how do you avoid the trap?
Well, this is where we have to completely reframe how we think about success itself. Here's the core mistake in our thinking. We assume talent is vertical, that being amazing at one thing means you'll automatically be great at the next thing up the ladder. But what if talent is actually horizontal? What if you're an elite specialist and becoming a generalist manager is actually a step down in terms of your unique value and skill? This right here is the key takeaway. Being elite at level 1 says absolutely nothing about your ability to survive at level 2. We mistake mastering one game for a free pass to win a totally different one.
So here's the crucial point. The winning move might not be to climb. It might be to master your current level, become the absolute best in the world at what you do, and grow your value that way. It's about consciously choosing to dominate your game instead of being forced to play a new one you're probably going to lose.
And that leaves all of us with a final question to really think about for our own careers. When that next promotion comes along, don't just ask if it's a step up. Ask yourself if it's a step onto a ladder you actually want to be on. And more importantly, a ladder you're actually equipped to climb. Hey, welcome. So today we're going to talk about something we all chase, the promotion. You know, we're taught from day one to always be climbing, always say yes to that next step up. But what if I told you that next step could actually be a trap that's almost designed to make you fail? Let's pull back the curtain on this whole thing. Seriously, I want you to just think about this question for a second. We automatically assume a promotion is a good thing, right? It's a reward. It means you did great work. But the system itself, the way we promote people, it has this hidden flaw. And that flaw can turn what feels like your biggest career win into an absolute nightmare. I mean, that's a pretty wild statement, isn't it? It just cuts right to the heart of the problem. We throw parties, we update our LinkedIn profiles, all for a change that might be setting us up for a future of stress, burnout, and feeling totally incompetent. How on earth is that possible? So here's how we're going to break this down. First, we'll look at the trap itself. Then we'll talk about something I call your competence cliff. After that, a much smarter way to make the decision. Then the ultimate power move, which is saying no. And finally, what it actually means to win the real game at work. Okay, so let's dive right into the trap. It's built on a really simple statistical idea that, for some reason, most companies, and honestly most of us, just completely ignore when it's time to hand out that shiny new title. The concept is called regression to the mean. And all it really means is that a streak of amazing luck or just peak performance is, statistically going to be followed by a return to your normal average. Think about a basketball player who's on fire and hits 10 shots in a row. They're not going to do that forever, right? Eventually, they'll just regress back to their normal shooting percentage. It's just math. And here is the absolute kicker. When do you get promoted? It's always after a spectacular year, a time when your good skills were probably supercharged by a run of really good luck. So you get promoted at your absolute statistical peak, which is precisely when your performance is most likely to dip back down to normal. And it happens just as you're starting a much harder job. It is a total double whammy. Okay, so to really understand this danger, we have to stop thinking about our careers like a ladder. We need a new visual, a new way of thinking about it. And that's going to reveal something I like to call the competence cliff. First things first, just delete that image of a career ladder from your brain. Seriously, that idea of just climbing straight up and up and up isn't just wrong, it's actually pretty dangerous. It's what leads us right into this trap we're talking about. Instead, I want you to picture your career as a graph. So on the vertical axis, you've got your competence, like how good you actually are at your job. And on the horizontal axis, you've got your job level, from junior to senior to manager and beyond. Now, just watch the shape this graph takes. At level 1, when you're a junior, you're like a sponge. Your competence just soars. At level 2, as a senior, you've hit your zone of genius. You're an expert, you're in the flow, it feels amazing. But then comes that manager promotion. And suddenly, your job is less about your craft and way more about meetings and admin. Your competence dips. And then director? Oh man, for a lot of people, it's all politics and spreadsheets. And this is where that competence line doesn't just dip, it completely crashes. You're just drowning in a role you were never really built for. So if the graph shows us the problem, how do we actually make a better decision? Well, we need a new formula, one that calculates way more than just a bigger salary and a cooler title. This is where a concept called expected utility comes in. And it's a really simple but super powerful way to weigh a decision. You basically take all the good stuff, so happiness plus money, and you subtract the bad stuff, which is usually stress. And what's left is your net outcome. It's about measuring what a job actually feels like, day to day. not just what it says on your business card.
And this little table just shows the trade-off so clearly. You know, staying in your zone of genius might have a good salary and really low stress, which gives you this huge positive utility. But taking that promotion, sure, the salary might go up a little bit, but the stress can just skyrocket. And that can lead to a negative net outcome. I mean, a rational person would never take that trade, but we do it all the time because we're chasing the title.
Okay, so you've done the math. You realize the promotion is probably a trap for you. But how do you actually say no without, killing your career? Well, it turns out that declining is the ultimate power move, but only if you do it the right way. Here is the 3-step playbook. First, you do a skills audit with your boss. Get totally aligned on where you create the most value for the company. Second, you separate the idea of pay from the role. The goal is a raise, not necessarily a new title you don't even want. And third, you frame your refusal as a deep commitment to excellence. You're not being lazy, you're making a conscious choice to double down on what you are truly great at.
And this is exactly why it's a power move. It signals this incredible confidence. It tells your company that you are not desperate for a title just to feel validated. You know your worth, you know your skills, and you are making a strategic call to be exceptional rather than just mediocre in a different job.
So this all leads to a much bigger idea, really. We have to completely change how we define what it even means to be successful at work in the first place. The real goal isn't to get the corner office or the biggest title on the org chart. The goal is to maximize your utility, to find that perfect spot on your competence graph where you are happy, you're well compensated, and you're not overwhelmed by stress. It's about optimizing for your life, not just your LinkedIn profile. And I want to leave you with this one thought. The smartest person in the room isn't always the one at the very top. It's often the person who found the exact height where they were most effective and happiest, and then had the incredible discipline and self-awareness to just stop climbing. They're the ones who won the real game. So I want you to think about your own career and the people you've worked with. Have you ever seen a brilliant engineer or a great writer or a fantastic salesperson get promoted into a miserable, ineffective manager? This whole idea is actually called the Peter Principle, and once you see it, you start seeing it everywhere. I'd love to hear your stories about this, so share them in the comments below.